What happens when the man who built the business from nothing walks straight into one of his own restaurants and realizes no one there gives a damn? Quentin Tate stood in the back alley behind Store 17, zipping up a black windbreaker over a company-issued polo shirt. His beard was gone. His usual sharp glasses swapped for a cheap pair from the pharmacy. He dyed his hair a little darker, added a slight limp, and dropped his voice an octave. Not that anyone here would recognize him. This was one of 19 stores, and he'd never met most of the floor staff. The store was short-staffed. Again. He didn't need reports to tell him that. Orders had been late, online reviews were slipping, and one customer had emailed corporate saying they waited 20 minutes just for water. Quentin had started this chain 10 years ago with one food truck and a folding table. Now it had almost 24 sit-down spots across the state. Somewhere along the way, something had gone sideways. He walked in through the staff entrance, pretending to fumble with a phone. "Hey, I'm the new trainee. Elijah sent me." The assistant manager, a tall guy in his 20s with a clipboard and resting scowl, didn't even look up. Yeah, you're the new temp. Go grab an apron. Name? Chris."
Cool.
"Chris, you're shadowing tonight. We're slammed. Don't get in the way." Dinner rush was already on. The air buzzed with noise orders being called out, plates clattering, phones ringing. Quentin was told to follow a server named Frankie, who looked like she hadn't sat down all day. She was young, maybe early 20s, with light brown skin, dark curly hair pulled into a loose ponytail, and a belly that was clearly carrying more than a food baby. "Hey," she said, catching him staring.
I'm Frankie.
"You're shadowing me?"
Yeah, Chris.
"First day." She gave a quick nod. "All right. Stay close. I'll do the talking." Quentin followed her from table to table. She moved fast, balancing plates, remembering orders, joking with customers. But he noticed how she leaned on the edge of counters even when she didn't need to, and how she winced when she thought no one was looking. By hour 2, the place was packed. The line at the door stretched out to the sidewalk. A food runner tripped in the kitchen and dropped a tray of fries. The manager, Kyle, started barking orders from the bar, clearly overwhelmed. Frankie approached him quietly.
Kyle.
"I need a break. Just 10 minutes. Please." "We don't have time for breaks, Frankie. You know that. I've been on my feet since 11. I just need to sit. My back's locking up." Kyle didn't even lower his voice. "You think I care if your back hurts? You take a break now, we fall behind. You want to sit, go home. Your choice." She opened her mouth like she might argue, then just nodded and turned away. Quentin stood frozen next to the soda fountain. The tray in his hand suddenly felt too heavy. He watched as Frankie walked to the storage room. A few seconds later, he heard a choked sob. He hesitated. His chest tightened. Then he set the tray down on the nearest counter and followed. The door to the storage room was half open. Frankie sat on an upside-down crate, head in her hands, shoulders shaking.
He knocked lightly. "Hey.
You all right?" She wiped her eyes fast.
"Yeah, I'm fine."
"Hormones, you know?" She half laughed through it, but her voice cracked. "That was rough out there." She shrugged. "I'm used to it. You shouldn't be." She looked at him, really looked, and tilted her head. "You don't talk like the others. You knew." He smiled.
"Yeah.
First day." She gave him a tired nod. "Well, welcome to the circus." They were interrupted by Kyle yelling from the kitchen. "Frankie, you done crying? Let's go." She stood slowly, bracing her hand against the wall. Back to it. Quentin watched her walk out, then leaned against the doorframe, jaw tight. He'd seen enough to know this wasn't just a bad night. This was a broken system. And it was his. Quentin clocked back in from his fake bathroom break and re-entered the chaos. The dining floor looked worse than before. Guests waited impatiently with half-empty glasses and no sign of entrees. Two servers had disappeared. One was probably crying in the stockroom, and the other hadn't been seen since the kitchen backup started. Kyle hadn't moved from the bar, but his voice cut across the restaurant like a warning siren. Table 9. Who's got 9? They've been sitting there with empty drinks for 15 minutes. No one responded. The hostess was bussing tables. The dishwasher was out front helping refill waters, and the kitchen line was buried. Quentin grabbed a tray and made his way over. The couple at the table looked up. The man spoke first. We ordered over half an hour ago. Just appetizers. Nothing crazy. Quentin nodded. I'm really sorry. I'll check on that personally. Can I get you something while you wait? The woman looked over his shoulder, scanning the room. I don't want to be rude, but... Is this normal here? He didn't answer. Instead, he headed to the kitchen pass shelf where plates were piling up unattended. He spotted a basket of sliders with a ticket labeled Table 9, 6:42 p.m. It was now past 7:30. He grabbed them and brought them over. I'm comping these. They should have come out 20 minutes ago. The couple exchanged a look, surprised. You're not the manager, are you? The woman asked.
No.
Just helping out. Quentin turned to head back, but something caught his eye. A busser, no older than 17, was struggling to clear a 6-top alone plate stacked to his chin, glassware clinking dangerously as he wobbled toward the kitchen. Quentin stepped in, grabbed the top layer off the stack, and steadied him. Thanks, the kid mumbled, eyes wide. They usually don't let servers help us. Who said I was a server? That earned a quiet laugh, but the kid didn't slow down. You should talk to the prep cook if you get a chance. He's quitting tomorrow. Why? Can't keep doing doubles. They keep calling him in on his days off. The kid disappeared into the kitchen and Quentin followed, stepping into a wall of heat and noise. The grill cook, arms slick with sweat, barked out to no one in particular. Where's my expo? Half these plates are dying on the pass. Quentin scanned the line. The prep guy, a stocky man in his 40s, was hurriedly slicing onions with headphones on. The dishwasher, clearly not trained for this, was now helping plate desserts. No one looked up. No one had time to. In the corner, a younger cook crushed a plastic cup in his fist and tossed it behind the trash bin. 2 weeks I've been asking for gloves. My hands are tearing up. You think anyone cares? Quentin approached, careful not to interrupt the rhythm. You're not getting gloves? We're in out. Kyle said orders delayed. Again. Said use paper towels if it gets bad. Quentin looked at the kid's hands red, cracking, one knuckle visibly raw. He turned back toward the prep cook.
Hey.
Heard you're thinking about leaving. The man didn't answer until he finished wrapping a tray of cut vegetables. Then he glanced over. Thinking?
Nah.
I told Kyle I'm out. Tomorrow's my last shift. Too much. Too little. Too little help. Too little respect. Too little pay for the hours they keep tacking on. I've been doing this job 20 years. Never had a manager treat people like they were disposable till now. Quentin had no argument. He just nodded and stepped out. Back on the floor, Kyle stood with his arms crossed, chewing gum and watching the servers scramble. He noticed Quentin returning from the kitchen. Hey, Chris. Don't go disappearing on me, man. We don't have time for sightseeing. Quentin kept his tone even. Was checking on the food for table 9. It was just sitting there. Kyle raised an eyebrow. That's not your job. You're shadowing. Let the servers do their jobs. They're drowning. One's in the back crying, 2 others are already past their shifts, and there's no expo. You want me to just stand around? Kyle took a step closer. You're here to learn, not take over. You run your mouth again. You're clocking out early. The threat hung in the air. Quentin stared at him, but didn't speak. Not yet. A commotion near the front pulled both their attention. A man in a plaid shirt was waving his arm, gesturing angrily at a server. His voice carried. I said no onions. What kind of idiot can't read a ticket? The server Quentin recognized her from earlier was frozen, holding the plate with trembling hands. The customer snatched it from her, slammed it down on the table, and stood. Get me someone who knows what they're doing. This is ridiculous. Kyle moved fast, but not toward the customer. He grabbed the plate from the table and turned on the server. You mess up another ticket, you're off the floor. I don't care how many tables you've got. The woman's eyes glistened, but she nodded and walked off without a word. Quentin stepped forward. You're seriously siding with that guy? Kyle didn't turn. She's new. She needs to learn fast or get out. She didn't do anything wrong. The kitchen messed up the ticket. He screamed at her. Kyle turned now. You want to defend her?
Great.
Then you can help her finish her section. Since you're so invested. Quentin didn't answer. Instead, he walked toward the front door, pulled out his phone, and called the corporate line. He asked for Elijah, the regional director. Tell him Quentin needs to speak with him. Tonight. He hung up before they could ask questions. Back inside, he returned to the hostess stand where a young woman was trying to calm a mother with two restless kids. She gave Quentin a tired look. We're still quoting 20. We haven't seated a full table in 10. Quentin scanned the floor. Half the tables were still waiting on food. One server was now covering 8 tables alone. Frankie had returned to the floor but looked pale and was gripping the back of a chair for balance. He approached her. You need to sit. She shook her head. If I sit, Kyle sends me home. I need the hours. You can't get hours if you collapse. She looked away.
Ai fine.
Quentin turned and walked straight to Kyle. She's done for the night. She's resting in the office. That's not a request. Kyle blinked, then laughed. You don't give orders here, buddy. Quentin stepped closer. You sure? Kyle's mouth opened, but then the door swung open behind him. Elijah walked in, straight from his car, still wearing his corporate badge. He scanned the room, then spotted Quentin.
Sir.
You called. Quentin nodded. Loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, he said, This location is in violation of 3 labor codes, and I've counted at least 6 safety issues in the last hour. We're pulling the manager. Effective immediately. Kyle turned pale.
Wait. What?
Who the hell are you? Quentin pulled off his hat. I'm Quentin Tate. I built this company. And I just spent 5 hours watching you run it into the ground. Kyle stepped back. Look, I didn't know. You didn't need to know who I was to treat people like human beings. Kyle's mouth opened again, but Elijah was already stepping in. Let's go.
Now.
As Kyle was escorted out, the room fell silent. Frankie stared from across the room, stunned. One of the cooks peeked out from the kitchen. The server who'd been screamed at was frozen mid-step. Quentin turned to the staff. I need 10 minutes. Then we're going to fix this. Together. He looked at Frankie. Starting with you. You're going home with pay for the rest of the week. We'll cover it. That's not a favor, it's overdue.
She didn't speak.
Just nodded once, hand on her belly. Quentin exhaled and headed toward the back. The hard part wasn't over. It was just beginning. Quentin sat alone at a booth near the back, elbows on the table, eyes fixed on the floor. The restaurant had quieted slightly, but the tension hadn't eased. Staff whispered in corners. Customers glanced around trying to figure out what had just happened. The air still carried the weight of what everyone had witnessed. Elijah returned from the office, his voice low and firm. Kyle's gone. We'll file the necessary reports with HR and legal tomorrow. I'll get a temporary manager in by morning. Quentin nodded. No managers until then. Just shift leads. Keep it lean. I want to watch how this team moves without him breathing down their necks. You want me to step in for tonight?
No.
They've had enough people talking at them. I'll help coordinate. Quietly. Elijah hesitated. You sure? Quentin met his eyes. I haven't been more sure of anything in a long time. Elijah gave a short nod and left to make calls. Quentin stood and walked to the kitchen. The grill man was still at it, sweat dripping off the end of his nose. The prep cook who'd planned to quit was loading a fresh tray into the walk-in. The kid with the peeling hands was now using paper napkins wrapped under rubber bands as makeshift padding. Quentin walked up beside him. "You got a name?" The kid looked up, cautious. "Marcus." "You were on dessert station earlier?"
Yeah.
Then the dishwasher needed help. Then Expo fell behind. So, I just kinda filled in. Quentin nodded. "You trained for any of that?"
No.
"I just kinda watch people." "You're 18? 17. You ever been told you're doing too much?" Marcus gave a quick shrug. "Not really. No one else gonna do it." Quentin called over one of the leads, a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and a steady posture. "This is Tanya," he said to Marcus. "She's going to pull you off the line and show you how to wrap those hands properly. After that, you're on light duty. Rest of the night." Marcus didn't protest. He just gave a quiet nod and followed Tanya out. Quentin turned to the prep cook. "You still quitting?" "Depends." "That guy Kyle's staying gone." "Permanently." The man gave a low grunt. "Then I'll give it a week. See what changes." Quentin moved back onto the floor. The young hostess from earlier was now seated on a bar stool behind the stand, her shoes off, one ankle wrapped with a towel. "What happened?" She rubbed her heel. "Twisted it when I was moving a chair. Didn't tell anyone. Didn't want to be sent home." "You have coverage?" She looked around. "No one else trained for host. I can still call out names." Quentin looked over at the bar back. "You know the floor layout?" He nodded.
Yeah.
"I used to host when I first started." "You're hosting now. Rest of the shift." The barback hesitated. "You serious?" Quentin didn't answer, just pointed to the host stand. The barback stepped in without another word. Frankie was in the break room, sipping water, her eyes half closed. A damp towel rested on the back of her neck. She looked up as Quentin entered. "You didn't have to cover for me," she said. "I could have pushed through." "Not about pushing through," he said. "It's about whether it's humane. And tonight wasn't." She gave a tired laugh. "It's been like this for months." "How far along are you?" 7 months. "You planning to keep working until the due date?" "I don't have a choice." Quentin sat across from her. "You ever talk to anyone in HR about reduced shifts?" "Modified duty." She looked at him like he'd asked if she'd visited the moon. "They don't return my calls." "You a single parent?" "Yeah." He nodded slowly. "We'll fix this. You'll get paid time off starting next week. Until then, you're on 4-hour shifts maximum.
No doubles.
No heavy lifting." Her jaw clenched. "And Kyle?" "Gone." She didn't smile, but her shoulders eased slightly. Back on the floor, the mood had shifted. Servers moved faster, not out of fear, but momentum. The tension had drained from their postures. No one was raising voices. The cook line was still behind, but nobody was panicking. Quentin gathered the staff for a brief huddle near the back kitchen door. "I know tonight's not over," he said, "but I want to be clear about a few things. First, no one's being punished for what happened earlier. No one's losing hours. No one's getting written up." A few heads tilted, wary. "Second, we're not bringing in a replacement manager until we find someone who leads with respect. That means I'll be here for the next several days. Not as your boss, as your support." The server who'd been screamed at earlier raised her hand hesitantly. "Is that allowed?" "It is now," Quentin said. She lowered her hand, eyes down. "Third," he continued, "if you've been asked to take on roles you weren't trained for, or you're covering 2 jobs without recognition, I want those names written down and given to Tanya by closing. We're adjusting pay retroactively for the last 60 days. Now the room shifted. A few eyes widened. One cook turned to the other, whispering something. They both nodded slowly. And last, if you've been mistreated, if you've asked for help and been ignored, I want to know.
No filters.
No fear. If you've got something to say, I'll stay until the last person's had their turn. The line cook with the raw voice from earlier stepped forward. I asked for gloves 3 times. Cal said use napkins. Said I was being soft.
Noted, Quentin said.
You'll have gloves by morning. And a hazard pay bonus for this week. Another server lifted his chin. I've been here 9 months. Never got a single performance review. No raise. Just new responsibilities every few weeks. You'll get a sit-down by end of month. With back pay, if we find you are due. More voices followed. Not hostile, just tired. Exhausted people finally being given space to speak. Quentin didn't interrupt. He scribbled notes in a small pad, not on a phone. No one was rushed. When one kitchen runner started crying halfway through her story about being scheduled for back-to-back shifts on her grandfather's funeral weekend, Quentin didn't speak. He just handed her a tissue and waited. By the time the floor cleared again, it was nearly last call. A few tables lingered, sipping drinks. The music was soft now, the lights dimmed. The energy had changed. Not fixed, but quieter, calmer. Quentin stood at the edge of the kitchen doorway, watching as Tanya coordinated the final round of orders. Frankie had gone home under escort, but not before whispering a thank you that barely made it out of her mouth. Elijah returned, coat over one arm, eyes scanning the floor. They're still here, he said. I figure half of them would walk. They didn't stay for the money. They stayed to see if someone would finally listen. Elijah nodded toward the booth, where Quentin had sat earlier. You writing everyone up? Quentin shook his head.
No.
I'm writing a new playbook. Because if this is happening here, it's happening at other stores too. Elijah raised an eyebrow. You going undercover again? Not just me, Quentin said. We're building a rotating audit team, real-time observers, not clipboard drones. I want reports from the floor level. Every store. Every shift. Elijah's brows lifted. You're serious. Dead serious. The door swung open near the back. The dishwasher stepped out, apron stained, wiping his hands. Anything else before I clock out? Quentin turned. You ever trained in food safety? The man looked puzzled.
No.
Why? You're getting certified. Company's covering it. Starting next week. He blinked, then nodded slowly.
All right.
Thanks. As the man disappeared through the back hallway, Quentin looked around one last time. The floor was clean. The kitchen was almost reset. The noise had fallen to a low hum. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt responsible. And he knew this was only the beginning. The doors closed for the night at 11:30. Chairs were flipped onto tables, the lights dimmed to their lowest setting, and the last of the guests slipped out into the cool air. The hum of the soda machine was the only sound left in the front of house as Quentin stood near the bar, watching Tanya count the register drawer with methodical precision. 58 short, she said without flinching. Quentin nodded. Any chance it was a Ms. Ring? Doubt it. Cal took cash from the till earlier. He said it was for extra bread deliveries. She looked up. We don't get bread deliveries on Wednesdays. Quentin didn't answer. He just made a note on the pad he'd been carrying since his arrival. He would loop in finance first thing in the morning. It wasn't the first time he'd heard about cash handling issues. In the kitchen, the prep cook was wiping down the stainless steel table, moving slower than earlier, but more deliberate. He didn't glance over when Quentin stepped in. You staying on? Quentin asked, leaning against the doorway.
For now, the man said.
But I want a written schedule. No more being called in on my off days. And I want it posted 72 hours in advance. Quentin nodded. You'll have it by Friday. Company-wide policies changing. If it's not followed, you call me directly. You giving every cook your number?
No.
Just the ones who've been ignored for too long. The man looked at him for the first time that night. You're not what I expected. Quentin gave a slight shrug. I wasn't expecting this either. The dish pit was almost empty. Marcus, hands now wrapped in proper gauze with tape, was finishing the last of the silverware. Tanya had made sure he didn't lift anything heavier than a utensil bin all night. You good?
Quentin asked.
Marcus gave a nod. I guess so. You guess? I mean, yeah. Just weird. No one's ever stepped in for us like that. Well, that's changing. Marcus hesitated, then asked, You really own this place? Founded it 10 years ago. He exhaled. My brother said it started with one truck. That true?
Yeah.
Downtown parking lot. We didn't even have a fryer for the first year. Marcus's eyes lit up. Just a little. That's wild. Quentin smiled. You ever want to move up, Marcus, you let me know. We've got apprenticeship programs starting next quarter. You've got the eye. I don't even know what I'm good at yet. That's exactly when you ask questions. Not after. The kid looked down, nodded once, and went back to his task. Quentin returned to the break room. The server who had been berated by the customer earlier was sitting on the couch, arms crossed, staring at the vending machine like it had insulted her. Mind if I sit? He asked. She didn't answer, but didn't say no either. He took a seat a few feet away. You handled yourself well tonight. She let out a dry laugh. I froze. I didn't say a word. You didn't escalate. You didn't walk off. That's not nothing. I wanted to say something. But I didn't want to lose my job. You won't. And what that customer said was unacceptable. We've flagged his account. He won't be served at any of our locations again. She blinked. Wait, you can do that? I did. She looked away, jaw tightening. Feels like we've been disposable for years. Like if we don't smile through it, we're out. That ends now. She finally turned to him. You really think you can fix all of it? One visit.
No.
But I can start. And I don't plan to stop. She gave a slight nod. Then I'll stay. For now. That's all I ask. He left her to rest and stepped into the office. Elijah was finishing paperwork, his coat still folded over the chair. We'll need to do full audits on payroll, scheduling, and compliance here, Elijah said without looking up. I've already requested time cards from the last 60 days. Good. I also want a full review of manager hiring practices. Find out how Kyle passed vetting. Elijah set down his pen. You think he doctored something? I think he knew how to talk up. And nobody was watching how he talked down. Elijah nodded. I'll pull the interview tapes. Also, start building out an internal reporting line. Direct to corporate. Anonymous if needed. Elijah raised an eyebrow. You want to bypass store management entirely? If employees don't trust their in-store leadership, they need another option. No more waiting until it's too late. The office door creaked open. Tanya stepped in, holding a clipboard. Final tip reports are in. I've split them based on actual hours worked.
No skimming.
Quentin nodded. Thank you. She handed the sheet to Elijah, then turned to Quentin. You staying through close tomorrow too? I'll be here before open. She studied him for a moment. You know, most owners wouldn't want to see what you saw tonight. That's exactly why I needed to. She left without another word. Elijah looked at him. You're going to burn out if you keep this up. Maybe, Quentin said, but not before I fix this. He stayed until nearly 2 in the morning. Once the last employee had clocked out, he walked the floor alone. He ran his hand along the booths, checked the corners for crumbs, made sure the restrooms were stocked. It wasn't about micromanaging. It was about remembering what mattered. As he locked up, the cold air hit his face sharply. He stood for a moment outside the glass doors, looking in. The space was quiet now, almost peaceful. He thought of Frankie, of the way she'd braced herself against the wall just to keep going. He thought of Marcus and his padded hands. He thought of the server who'd been humiliated by a stranger and told to take it. And he thought of Kyle, of how easy it had been for someone like that to rise through the system when no one was looking. But someone was looking now. The next morning, the doors opened at 10 sharp. Quentin was back in uniform, same windbreaker, same dyed hair, but now everyone knew who he was. There were no speeches, no grand announcements, just a quiet shift lead briefing from Tanya, a revised floor plan, and a clean schedule pinned to the corkboard in the break room with everyone's hours printed clearly. At 11, Quentin stood by the soda machine as guests began to trickle in. One of the servers walked by with a tray of drinks and gave him a nod. "You staying out here today?" she asked. "Most of it."
Good, she said.
"Feels different already." He watched as she disappeared around the corner, tray steady in her hands. It wasn't perfect. Not yet. But it was starting. And this time, he wasn't stepping away again.